Welcome to this tutorial on how to build your ultimate API toolkit for hackathon success. Whether you're brand new to hackathons or a seasoned pro, you probably know that hackathons are all about speed. You want to be able to rapidly build an MVP that's going to show off your skills to the judges, and leveraging free APIs is a great way to do that. APIs can give you access to data that you might not otherwise have and processes that it would be very time-consuming to build yourself from scratch. So let's take a look at how APIs can be used to speed up your hackathon hacking. I've broken this down into 4 categories, and the first category we're going to start with is general APIs for boilerplate procedures. So this is the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to build yourself during a hackathon. This is things like user auth, image processing, email verification, phone number validation, all of these kind of procedures that you're going to need to do probably in your app to do things like log users in that you don't want to necessarily spend a lot of time building out yourself because you just don't have time to do that. Data encryption, real-time messaging, IP geolocation, all of these are things that APIs can handle for you. Let's look at an example of using an API to validate a phone number for login. So you could use Twilio to do something like this, but you could also use this free NumVerify API. You can sign up for a free account. It costs you nothing. It'll give you access to 100 free requests per month, which is plenty to build out an MVP and test it during a hackathon. It's very easy to sign up. Tell them you're not a robot, create an account, and you will land on your dashboard where you'll get access to your API key. This is going to let you make requests against the API and authorize you. And let's have a look at this sandbox that they've given us here to play with. So we can see, let's just put in our information here. So we are in the United States. And we're going to click run over here on the right hand side, and it's going to query the API and validate this phone number that we've given it. And as you can see, it gives us back a JSON response with valid true, indicating that yes, this is a valid phone number, and then a little bit more information about the number, like where it's located and the carrier and that kind of a thing. So how can we use this information in our own project? Well, let's have a look. I've mocked out a very basic front end here. Obviously, this doesn't actually work. There's no state management or anything going on here, but this is just to give you an idea of what you could do with this information. So let's say we've got an input, a telephone input, where a user is going to input their phone number during login. So we've given them this nice input here, and then underneath we've given them a button that they're going to press when they're ready to sign up. And the first step in that sign up process is going to be to validate this phone number. So in our server back here, which is the server that is serving our application, and it's just a really basic Express server, requiring Express, setting up Express, telling it to listen on port 3000. I'm using .env here to keep our API access key secret because you never want to commit those to a repository. You always want to keep that in an environment folder. And then here's our base URL for the API. This is the URL that we're going to hit to validate this phone number. And then I've just built a single route here called validate number. And this is where, when we click this button here, this is where that request is going to get sent to validate this number. So it's going to hit this endpoint, and then our server is going to pull the user's phone number out of that query, and Express gives us a nice request object that we can do that with. And we're going to forward that number to the API, right, to that same base URL, appending our access key and appending the phone number. The API is going to send us back a JSON response, and then we're going to look at that response, and we're going to use that response to determine if the number is valid. Remember, from our hang on a second, where is it? There it is. So from our response that we looked at earlier, this is what we're getting back from the API. So we're going to use that value to determine if the number is valid. And if it is, then we'll send the user along to the next step of our sign-up process. If it's not, we're going to raise an error to the client saying, hey, this is an invalid phone number. The user should not be able to sign up with this. So that's one example of how you can use a general API to handle some processes for you during a hackathon. There are lots of other things you can use APIs for example, specific types of project. One super common type of project that you see a lot during hackathons are like finance projects, and you can use fintech APIs to help you build these. So by finance projects, I'm talking about things like personal budgeting apps that might help a user track their budget, a stock market tracker that allows a user to view and maybe even trade on stocks, e-commerce payment systems, cryptocurrency wallets. Those are getting super popular nowadays. Credit score calculators, things like that. Things that have to do with money, have to do with finance, and can help the user achieve something with their money. So how can we use APIs to build these things? Well, let's take a look at how we might use an API to help us build a cryptocurrency wallet. So I'm here on the CoinLayer API, and I won't take you through the whole sign-up process again, but it's very similar to what we just looked at with the NumVerify API. You'll be brought to your dashboard again, where you'll see your API access key and a link to documentation. So let's go ahead and take a look at the documentation here. So here's an example of the response that the CoinLayer API is going to send back to us. And it's a JSON object again, and it gives us basically the rates of about 385 cryptocurrency coins. So you can see we've set the target here to be the US dollar, and we can see the value of each of those coins in terms of the US dollar. So how would we use this information? Well, one thing we could do is use something like React Stock Charts, which is a data visualization library that uses D3 to create really beautiful stock and data charts. So for example, like a candlestick chart, that's something you might typically see to visualize stocks with or to visualize cryptocurrency fluctuations. And this is a freely available open source library that you can install in your project. And then you might use, for example, I've set up a route here on our server so that when the user loads the app, the client, let's say it's our React client, is going to hit this endpoint, and we're going to pull some crypto data from the API. And then ideally, we will feed that crypto data into our React stock chart visualizer and draw a nice visualization so that the user can see the cryptocurrency valuations. Now, we don't just want to hit this endpoint one time. What we actually want to do is pull that endpoint so that the user gets constantly updated up-to-the-minute information. So you could write a polling function, and here I've just written a pretty basic one where I'm hitting that API URL, and I'm passing it a handle data function that's going to send any data it gets back from the API back to our React client. And I've also set up an interval of 60 seconds here and a cache as well, just to do some basic cache handling. And then, you just go through this polling function. We check the cache. If there's nothing in the cache, then we're going to hit the API. We're going to handle the case of, we're going to rate limit to make sure that we don't hit the API too many times. Obviously, we're going to do some error handling if something goes wrong. And then as long as we get back data from the API, we're going to cache it, and then we're going to send that data back to the client. And once the client gets that data, it is going to send it, our server, we're sending it back to our server here. And then our server is returning it to our React client, which is going to use React Stock Charts to draw a really nice visualization of that cryptocurrency. Another really popular type of hackathon project is travel projects. And by travel, I really mean anything that places a user physically in the world. And to do that, you're going to need to use geolocation. So this is apps like rideshare applications, right, where you need to know where the user is in order to be able to connect them with a driver. A restaurant recommender that shows you the locally available restaurants and maybe the reviews for them. A local dating app to connect you with singles in your area. Or something like a nearby tourism landmarks application, for example. All of these are going to require you to place a user somewhere on a map. And before you can do that, you need to geolocate them. The easiest way to geolocate someone is using their IP address. And so here we're looking at the IP Stack API, which allows you to locate and identify visitors by their IP address. So here you can see they've given us a nice sandbox here again. We can click this button and we can look up the location of this sample IP. You can see it's in North America. We can even see the zip code, the city, and crucially, we can get the latitude and longitude of this IP address. And now we know exactly where our user is in the world, and we can feed that latitude and longitude into another API, for example, the Google Maps API. That is going to allow us to build a map visualization with our user right in the middle of it. And then you can use this to do all kinds of things. You can use it to show commutes and transit information. You can use it to show restaurants and nearby landmarks. It's extremely powerful, and it's really not all that difficult to do. The IP Stack API is super easy to use. Again, you sign up the same way you did for the others. You're going to get 100 free requests per month. And once you have your access key, you can use that to make requests against the API using the base URL here. And you're going to pass it your access key, obviously, so you can authenticate yourself. And then you're going to use the IP address that you want to look up as the path in the URL. And the API is going to return to you another JSON object with a ton of information about that IP address. So as you can see here, we've got an IP address in California, we've got the latitude and longitude of that IP address, and we've got a lot of other information too about the time zone and that kind of thing. So how are we actually going to get the IP address from the user that we need to give to the API? Well, again, I'm here on our server. This is the same server that's serving our application, and I've set up another route called geolocate user. So when our front end wants to know where our user is in space, they can hit this endpoint. We are going to pull the IP address right off the request object that Express gives us. And this is a super handy thing that Express does for us. It just lets us grab the IP address of the device that sent the request. We're going to send that to the API at this base URL here, passing it the IP address as the path and our access key as a query parameter. We're going to wait for the JSON response, and then when it comes back, we're just going to send that response back to the client. The client can then use that geolocation information, the latitude and longitude, to hit the Google Maps API and draw a nice map visualization that shows us where our user is in the world. So another super popular category that is really gaining a lot of traction in recent years is apps that have to do with AI and machine learning. And you might think that it sounds really complicated to build an application powered by AI during a hackathon, but actually there are machine learning APIs that can help you do this. So we're just going to briefly look at one that could help us build, for example, a journaling app that analyzes the text that the user inputs using natural language processing and returns to us an evaluation of the emotion contained within that text. So we're on the APILayer marketplace here, and I got here by just signing up for a free APILayer account. And as you can see, there are tons of APIs here for you to explore. This is the IP Stack API that we just used to geolocate our user. This is the NumVerify API that we used to validate that phone number. And here's the CoinLayer API that we used to do our crypto visualization. They also have some AI and machine learning powered APIs. There's a few different ones here. The one that we are specifically going to look at is this text to emotion API. And this is pretty cool. It basically lets you send along a string of text, and then it analyzes that text using natural language processing and returns to you an emotion score based on that analysis. And the score is going to come back in exactly the same way as a super basic JSON object with basically a score, a mood score assigned to each facet of the text. So as you can see here, we got angry, fear, happy, sad, and surprised, and it's analyzed some text and it's given it a score based on each type of mood. So you can subscribe for free. Again, you're going to get 100 free requests per month. And then if you click the live demo button, you'll be taken to this playground where you can make sample requests against the API. So they've set all this up for us. I didn't write any of this. This raw variable is going to be where our string, our text string, gets input. So let's put some text into this HTTP body box that they've got over here. And since we're trying to build a journaling app, we're going to imagine that our user maybe has entered some text that says something like, "Dear diary, today it was my birthday and everybody came to wish me happy birthday." And we're now hitting the API, and as you can see at the top there, it's loading. So right now it's processing, and then here's our result. So this is how the API has interpreted the emotion of that text. And I'd say it's actually done a pretty good job here. So as you can see, there's 0 anger, 0 fear. We've basically got 50% happy and 50% surprise, which I'd say is a very accurate reading of this. So what could we do with this? Well, one thing we could do is we could maybe use the Emoji Emotion Library, which is a free open source library available through NPM that will give you emojis with a name and with a polarity score assigned to them. So you could see how you could maybe use this polarity score here in tandem with the mood score and the mood labels that you've already gotten back from the API to render an emoji based on the emotion of this text. So let's say this was surprised and angry. You could pick the surprised and angry emojis and then have a calendar app that just displays a different emoji for each journal entry. And that would give the user a really nice overall view of how their mood is fluctuating throughout the week. This could be useful for things like mental health apps for users who are trying to track their mood day to day and improve their mental health. So as you can see, there are tons of powerful things that you can do with APIs during a hackathon. Hopefully this gave you some ideas for your own projects, and hopefully it got the wheels turning a little bit about how you can start building your own API toolkit for hackathon success.